Hi, this is Billie Tarasi with the Modern Divorce Podcast for another special edition with attorney Darin Colburn. How you doing, Darin?
I'm doing good. I can be Goldberg today.
Apparently, I'm tongue-tied. I'm so excited to record this because we've been talking about Jeff Bezos and his divorce from MacKenzie Bezos since we started thinking about talking about celebrity divorces. And finally, the time has come for us to talk about this. And it's so interesting from a divorce attorney perspective for so many reasons. So, Darin, first, can you give us some background on Jeff, MacKenzie, Lauren, and their divorce?
I'll let you handle Lauren, but I'll
Okay.
go with Jeff and McKinsey.
Okay.
Um, but everyone knows Amazon. It's basically pervasive. Users, millions and millions of users across the globe, really revolutionized the way that commerce works. And But that all started with Jeff Bezos and Amazon and the idea of selling books online. And at the time, Jeff Bezos, back in the early '90s, he was a Wall Street guy with managing a hedge fund, and McKinsey was actually working with him. She was like, I think, a couple offices down from him, and they got married shortly after they started dating. And so she's been part of his journey and part of Amazon's rise, um, uh, basically through and through. And so at the time when they were married, they lived in New York. Jeff decided he wanted to pursue his dream of this publishing company. McKinsey, again, who also worked at this hedge fund, is very credentialed and very bright. She kind of had her own aspirations, which was to be an author.
Mm,
And so I think it's interesting because there's kind of synergy there. And she's actually now a best-selling published author. Probably doesn't hurt that
doesn't
her
hurt.
husband owns like the biggest book distributor in the world. But anyway,
Right.
I can't comment on the books. I'm sure they're good. Um, but um, but anyway, they basically upended their very cushy lives to pursue this dream, um, and originally ended up moving to Texas. She drove them across country while he was like working on his business plan. It was very in interviews she said that the thing that engaged her was the you know Jeff is somebody, they're very much in love, very happy, and to see your spouse be passionate about something was something she was on board for. And I think that definitely plays a role into like community property theory. Um, Long story short, they ended up moving to Washington, which is where Amazon is kind of famously headquartered, and that's where they kind of built this empire um, together. I mean, they really did build it together, because you can't achieve that level of success without having, a happy home life, I would imagine. But he tends to get all the credit. Their divorce is, Billy will get into the kind of salacious details, but their divorce is famous and interesting because Amazon is a publicly traded company, one of the largest companies in the world. So we don't have all the details of their divorce, but we do know the biggest portions because their biggest asset is Amazon shares, and that's publicly traded. So we know what Jeff Bezos' stake in Amazon was worth when they filed for divorce, and we know how much she received. She basically received about 25%, and which was like $36 billion at the time. And arguably, she was entitled to double that. Well, not arguably. I mean, pretty pretty definitively, she's entitled to double that, which is kind of interesting. So I'll kick it off with you.
Absolutely. It is interesting. So uh, Mackenzie walks away with far less than she was entitled to. And yet she's still the richest woman, I think, in the country. Is that right? Did you tell me that?
At the time, so at the time of their divorce, with the 36 million, she became the richest woman in the country. But because of Amazon's performance through the pandemic, she is now the richest woman in the world. So her
Wow.
36 billion dollars has basically doubled anyway. Now
Wow.
Jeff Bezos's shares have also skyrocketed.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So how long were they married?
well, I believe they got married in 1993. So,
And the divorce was 2019, right? I think it was
yeah,
2019.
2019 they announced it, I believe, in early January. Um, and so that would put them like 20, 26 years thereabouts.
And they have 4 kids, is that correct?
I have no idea.
Okay. All right. So we don't know how many kids they have. But
They do have children, I know that.
the crazy thing about their divorce is that their breakup was so public, and the
Yeah.
details that came out about the breakup were so salacious. And
Mhm.
then you have the divorce, and we know nothing about it. It was completely private.
Yeah.
So we can't find anything. We don't know if they did collaborative law. We don't know if they did private mediation. If they filed documents in the court, those documents were sealed. And you and I have talked about this, how you can get your case sealed, but couples don't do that very often. They don't take the steps needed to seal a case. Certainly Jeff Bezos and MacKenzie did. Um, and what's so remarkable is you've got this long-term marriage. You've got these people who built this family, this life, this empire together. They seemed so happy. I've read that he was a really good husband, that when she finished her first book, or maybe it was her second book, he said, I'm canceling my meetings for the week so I can read and edit her book. Like, he was a devoted husband and she was a devoted wife. Then they have this crazy breakup that really surrounds a very salacious affair that he has with Hollywood reporter Lauren Sanchez, and yet they still managed to get divorced, where she walks away with way less than she was entitled to, and doesn't even say a word about it. Says
Yeah.
nothing but positive things about her husband.
Yeah, it's interesting too. This is not directly related, but as far as the salaciousness, one thing that I found really interesting, because it does give some insight into how these people think. Um, um, Many people know Jeff Bezos was blackmailed because he basically, how we all found out about the affair was somebody hacked his. I believe it might have been Lauren's brother who facilitated this, but don't quote me on that. But in any event, some very unfortunate um, photos, we'll say, compromising photos of Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, was hacked, and they basically said, if you don't pay us an exorbitant amount of money, we're going to publish this. Well, Jeff Bezos published the photos himself and wrote an article about it and said, if I can't stand up to blackmail, who can? And at that time, as far as we know, I mean, nobody knows what goes inside the home, but as far as we know, that was nobody knew about the affair. So he kind of outed himself to take a stand against blackmail. Um, and I've just always found that to be interesting.
Reminds me of Alexander Hamilton. That was the
Yeah,
same
yeah, yeah,
approach he
yeah.
took.
That's a great. I didn't even think about that. That's pretty.
Me
That's pretty
neither,
interesting.
until right now.
Yeah.
Didn't work out so well for Hamilton. Bezos seems to have fared well, so maybe this works better in business than it does in politics.
But he is willing, obviously, to be ballsy. I think the other thing that's interesting too is MacKenzie. So there's this giving pledge that Warren Buffett has initiated, that a lot of the world's richest people have signed on to. Jeff Bezos kind of famously has not. Other people are Richard Branson, um, Bill Gates, and ranging from donating half of their net worth either during their lifetime or upon their decease, to charity and charitable endeavors, or philanthropy, to up to 99% of it. And Bezos has not signed on to that. MacKenzie Bezos has. And I think that, to me, gives me some insight into who she is as a person. She's obviously not concerned with maximizing her wealth beyond a certain point. Otherwise, she wouldn't give away give away half of it. And Jeff Bezos, obviously, I mean, he hasn't. I mean, who knows? But he hasn't signed on to the pledge, so it's more important to him. Um, so I think that's an interesting dynamic.
It is interesting, and it's the real reason that you and I wanted to discuss this, is because I always my position was always, why did MacKenzie walk away with 25%? And it's even less than that because she didn't take the Washington Post.
Right, right. That's just Amazon,
That's
right?
just Amazon. So she walked away with far less than she was entitled to. And given the circumstances surrounding the divorce, she could have used that as leverage. She could have used the drama of the Lauren Sanchez situation to get more, at least possibly.
Right. And in Washington, it's it, the statutes. It's community property state. It's no fault, but my understanding from reading about it is that the courts have a certain amount of discretion. It's similar to Arizona in that it's an equitable distribution, which most of the time means equal, but doesn't necessarily mean equal. The thing that is interesting is, it is not uncommon for spouses of business owners to try to compromise because of the cost of litigating. Like, for example, if you're married to somebody who owns uh, an auto repair business or a dental practice or you name it, right? Um, Determining the value of these things is complicated in of itself, and it's open to a lot of debate. You can have, and it's very, very expensive. Oftentimes involves both people hiring experts, expending a lot of money. So sometimes people will make concessions because they don't have the resources to spend on litigating a case. These Both of these people absolutely had all the resources to litigate. Also, you don't need a business valuation to determine what Jeff Bezos' stake in Amazon is, because that's what share prices are for. So it's like very complicated. I'm sure the entirety of the assets are very complicated because they're wealthy. They probably have properties and
Oh
things
yeah.
all over the world. But in terms of the majority of their wealth, it's very simple because it's just tied to the majority of the wealth is going to be tied to Amazon shares, and you just look at the number of shares and and that day's prices, right? So
You're right.
um,
You're right. And
it's
this
fascinating.
happens with couples that we talk to all the time. There are couples that come to us, or clients that come to us that say, I know half is X, but I want to take way less than that, or I'm good to take way less than that.
Right.
And it's just a different mentality, it's just a different point of view. And then there are others who come to us and they say, I want to make sure that I get as much as I can, that I walk away in the best position that I can. And it always puts us as lawyers, I think, in a little bit of a difficult situation, because sometimes when people are willing to take much, much less than half, it's because they, like MacKenzie, are making a calculated choice for what they want and what's in their best interest and what's important to them and what's enough. And then other times there's, and we don't know what's going on in MacKenzie's head, but other times many people feel guilty asking for half, especially if they're not the spouse that, did most of the actual labor. They might feel like they don't deserve half. They've been told their whole marriage they haven't worked or they don't deserve half. And we don't know if MacKenzie felt that way. We don't know. And that's hard for me when I hear people, usually women, who are ready to walk away with far less than they could because they don't feel worthy. I always have a hard time as an attorney respecting those wishes.
Yeah, and sometimes that comes from years of conditioning. What happens within the marital home. Um, I I gotta tell you, her attorneys um, have the easiest job in the world. I mean, the reality is, like, in a case like this, there's no external pressure um, in terms of cost to settle. So the only reason the deal got done is because MacKenzie wanted it to
True.
get done.
Hmm.
And I can say that with a pretty high degree of confidence. It's like she's not saying, "Hey, let's not go over this," because I mean, she valued keeping things. I mean, they have kids together, right? The other the other thing that is interesting, there's lots of theories out there. One thing that I've heard that I thought was interesting is that, a bulk of her wealth is now tied to Amazon, which is kind of tied, very much tied to Jeff Bezos. Although now, I guess the recent news is he's stepping down. Um, but I've heard a theory that maybe she thought that if things were less stressful, um, and she were able to keep him in a good headspace, her shares are going to continue to go up because she had faith in him continuing to perform as CEO. And that has, in fact, not all because of Bezos. The pandemic's had a lot to do with it. But I mean, he did position the company to take advantage of a situation like this. But maybe she had some foresight there. But again, the other side of the coin is um, Bezos shares have also skyrocketed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. Maybe, but would he have performed less well if he only had half? I doubt it. And generally
No,
speaking,
no, he
sorry.
wouldn't have performed less well if he had half. But if he's involved in a contentious litigation, that could certainly impact, I think, the his performance.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, contentious litigation is a problem. And Mackenzie's not the one who leaked the affair. The Jeff and Mackenzie timed and collaborated on their divorce announcement, and they used conscious uncoupling language that said, "We've been working on this, we've decided to move forward." And they did this right before the salacious dick pics and text messages were leaked. And that she knew in advance. She knew before that. And it wasn't long after that they finalized their deal. It really gives us an interesting insight into her psychology. Does she really not think she could have gotten a better deal without, long, lengthy litigation? She certainly knows her husband better than we do. Does she think this
Right.
was as good as it could be? Or was she just like, I want to be done?
Yeah, I gotta imagine it's that she wanted to be done because, again, the just let's say we didn't value the Washington Post because that would be that's a little more arbitrary. Um, just looking at the shares, we know she could have gotten more. I mean, the worst lawyer could walk into court and say, Your Honor,
Do a lot.
uh, look at his share prices. And again, he doesn't even, we don't even have to coordinate some kind of, we don't even have to coordinate some kind of complicated buyout provision. You just have to give her half the shares. Like it's, and again, like it's complicated, but also really simple.
Mhm.
And I think that for whatever reason, she made a decision to just kind of keep things amicable. The other thing, in addition to just the money, he was able to retain all the voting rights for the shares that she was awarded.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, he's the CEO of this company. It's his baby. That's very important to him. She could have certainly used that as leverage if she
Yeah.
wanted to get more, because even beyond the money, um, his ability to control the company. I mean, these are, in his world, that's a big thing. And
Mhm.
she basically took the shares, but said, you can take my voting rights.
She did have so much leverage that she did not use. So you're absolutely right. She has all the leverage and she left so much on the table. And I personally think it was a mistake and she should have done better.
See, I think, I feel a little bit differently. And just because, like, for me, um, if I had 36 billion or 72 billion, that doesn't make it, I can't imagine it has any difference to me personally. I think about, and this is where I think personality comes into play, because, like, I would wonder, yes, I'm losing out on $32 billion, but what can I not do with $36 billion that I want to do
It's true.
financially? And so I think the interesting things about these high net worth cases is the stakes are both high, but they're also really low because there's no outcome where her, like, wildest needs are not taken care of. And so there could be a sense of cognitive dissonance between, at what point are we just talking about numbers on a page, you know?
You're absolutely right. The difference between 36 and 72 doesn't make a difference in whether or not she can work or has to work, doesn't make a difference in where she can live. As a practical matter, she can still have anything and everything she wants. And so, how does this choice, this dilemma, translate to our clients who are trying to decide, do I settle and cut my losses and walk away and claim peace? Or do I move forward and try to leave my marriage in as best a position as possible?
Well, I again, I think you have to look at the stakes, right? So if the offer on the table, if it's a good deal, like if we could just look at Amazon, if we could just look at stocks and say, we'll split it 50-50 and we can get that at the beginning of a case without going to trial, it's going to be less expensive. It's going to be more amicable. There's no doubt that's better for everyone. It's less strain on the resources. But oftentimes things don't happen that way. You have to negotiate back and forth. I think you have to look at what's at stake for people. Um, Big issues. One of the most divisive issues in Arizona, at least, is spousal maintenance because judges have such broad discretion. So you have to look at if somebody's offering you $1,000 a month and you need 1,500, you've done your budget, you've been as lean as you can be, and you know you need $1,500. Well, you don't really have the luxury of compromising taking 1,000 because it's below your needs threshold, right? And then you also have to consider the cost of proceeding in the litigation. I honestly don't think that any of these things were considerations for her. I guess the question is, um, for high net worth clients, um, are your needs taken care of? Are you going to be able to? I mean, are you going to be able to take care of your children? I mean, both these people have generational wealth. You
Mhm,
know,
mhm, mhm. It's true. So when you're doing this cost benefit analysis, when you're trying to decide, because it's so hard, you have so many decisions to make when you're going through a divorce, so many decisions. And one of the most difficult decisions is, should I take this settlement offer?
right,
There's a few ways to analyze it. One way is purely financial. How much money am I leaving on the table?
right,
And how much money will it cost me to recoup that money? And then what's the risk? So you can only, when we ask the question, how much money am I leaving on the table? Some of that is certain-ish,
right.
and some of it is very uncertain.
Yes,
When we're talking about spousal maintenance, it can be very, very uncertain. When we're talking about property division, it's more certain, but we've still got an equitable division. And then we've got the cost of litigation. So the cost of litigation is always an estimate. How much do we think it's going to cost to go to trial? We can get pretty close, but it's an estimate. The spousal maintenance is just so big, we don't know how much we're leaving on the table. And how much we're leaving on the table also could mean different things. It could mean, how much will the judge give me? Or it could mean, can I get a better deal with my spouse if I negotiate harder or in a different way?
right. And the other thing too, in terms of property, is like with a business, you may not know what the value of the business is, or what the judge thinks the value is until you get the ruling, because you can have an expert that says the business is worth $1 million, and another expert will say it's worth $500,000, and maybe the judge picks one of those numbers, maybe they pick somewhere in between. You don't know until the judge does it. All you can do is trust your expert and do the best work possible to try to maximize the outcome that you want.
Absolutely. And I think we should do an entire podcast about business valuations, attacking them one expert versus another expert, because it's fascinating.
Mhm.
And those divorces are some of the most difficult, because the business is a massive asset that could swing both ways. And the way you litigate that case, the expert that you hire, the way that you attack that, can have such an impact, but it can also have a big impact on how you position yourself for settlement. Now, we don't know if Jeff and MacKenzie used a mediator or if they sat down at a kitchen table and worked it out. But if you were going into mediation, how would you do that with a case like this?
I, you know, I don't know. It would be hard to it would be both hard and easy to negotiate a case like this. I think that the challenge, you really have to sit down with your client, and figure out what their objectives are. These are both very, very intelligent people. Um, and I mean, like the first conversation I'd have with MacKenzie is, do you, here's what you're entitled to, right? Here's not just in terms of value, this is how it should work, but also information. Um, and do you understand the entirety of your assets? Do you understand, everything from top to bottom? Because again, these people could have accounts in the Caymans and, businesses with it. I mean, they could be owners of thousands of businesses, right? Do you want us? We can get all that information, we can value it, we can inventory it, we can do that, from top to bottom. Is that what you're interested in, or are you interested in, striking a quick deal and moving on, right? Because I think you have to have that conversation up front, because, you have to figure out where she's at, right? And then figuring out what information we uh, do you need to get, and if you're looking for a settlement, I mean, that really controls what type of mediator you get as well. If Like, you don't need a really sophisticated mediator to negotiate the deal that they brokered, right?
Mhm.
um, you would need a very sophisticated mediator if we're trying to inventory everything. Yeah, so I don't know, those are kind of my thoughts.
The other thing is, like, where was Jeff and where was his headspace?
Yeah.
He was madly crazy, out of his mind, behaving like a different person in
Hmm.
love. His behavior was so uncharacteristic of Jeff Bezos, and it's continued. Jeff and Lauren are still going strong. They he wasn't making rational choices during that time.
Hmm.
It's unlike Jeff Bezos to behave brazenly and to be with a married woman out in public. He knows better, but he was still caught in that situation again and again. And so sometimes our clients have that happen. They're getting divorced from their spouse and they're saying to me, I don't know who this person is. This behavior is so out of character. And it might be because they've fallen madly in love and they're acting crazy. It might be because they're using drugs or going through a bipolar episode, or and they're not making rational choices. And it's possible that MacKenzie said, I don't want to do this. It is not emotionally worth it. So we've got the cost benefit analysis in terms of dollars, and then we've got what is the emotional toll. And the emotional toll is not the same for each person, because some people have a high tolerance for conflict and risk
And
and
stress.
stress,
Yeah.
and other people do not. And they know that the toll that the conflict and the stress and court would take on them is worth much, much more than it would be to somebody else.
Hmm. And that, I think, is, comes more into play when you're on that kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs thing, where no matter what happens, you're taken care of to a certain degree. So what is I mean, to very, very wealthy people, I don't think anything is more, important to them than their time, right? Because that's kind of the great equalizer,
Mhm.
of us all. And I can imagine being in that position. It's like, all right, I'm gonna have everything I need. Do I want to have a good day tomorrow or a stressful day tomorrow? And
Yeah.
what things can I do to control that? And again, I mean, I I doubt she had. I I doubt that, both of them. Well, it's kind of interesting. I can't really imagine Jeff Bezos like following the advice of, a divorce attorney. It would be a very difficult client to have, because, he's probably more sophisticated than most people, including attorneys, and he employs a lot of attorneys, right? Like,
I was
so
thinking the same thing. Like, we're not
yeah.
telling them how to divide their assets. They're educating us about the accounts in the Cayman.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's a very valid point. And I think I gotta imagine that played a role in it. The other thing that's important to consider is we don't know what behind the scenes contracts they did when you get divorced. Um, we know the biggest picture which is Amazon, because it's publicly traded, but you can do what's called a property settlement agreement, which is basically a private contract, and nobody's ever going to know the terms of that. And you can be as creative in that as you want to. Um, Maybe she wanted to make sure that there are certain provisions in his will. The court would never necessarily order that,
Mhm,
but he could agree to it contractually, to make sure that the kids are taken care of,
mhm.
or I mean, who knows? You name it, they can do it. Um, so there could be a lot more going on behind the scenes that we don't know about.
It's true. And the other thing to consider is, I don't know how Washington tends to order parenting time, but they have 4 kids. And if it was very important for Mackenzie to not have to deal with Jeff, let's say Mackenzie didn't want to deal with Jeff and she didn't want to have parenting time exchanges. She wanted to keep the kids and she wanted to let them figure out their relationship with their dad on their own terms. It is much better in that situation to get a private settlement. And that might have been worth millions of dollars to her.
Yeah, I imagine, again, if you're kind of like, once you hit a certain stratosphere, there are certain things that money can't buy, right? And money can't buy your children's relationship with their parents, right? You can't control certain things. So maybe she felt like, if I take this path, I can maximize these things that are basically invaluable to me.
Right.
Um,
Right. I
so
want to raise my kids the way I want to. I don't want the court to have anything to do with it. I don't want to have a custody schedule. I don't want to be told how I have to share my children or what I can and can't do with them. And therefore, I'm trading this for dollars.
yeah, and that is, that really is a luxury to be able to do that. So it's funny. I read a blog too that of philanthropists that are upset that she didn't negotiate more, because she gave up half her net worth. They're like, hey, you just screwed us out of $17 billion.
Yeah, that's
It's just kind of funny, but like,
yeah, yeah.
uh,
The world might have been better off if Mackenzie had negotiated a little harder, but who knows?
yeah. Um, and we'll never know, but it is really interesting. And it could have been a lot more public. I wonder what would have happened to Amazon stock if they had had like a nasty divorce.
The pandemic was probably like I do more shopping on Amazon now than I ever did, and I did Amazon shopping before now, but now it's my go-to, and I think that I'm not alone, and nobody could have predicted just how the world and the pandemic would change Amazon. But I think that you're right. Mackenzie knew and knows that Jeff is brilliant. And
Yeah.
Jeff built something and he knows what he's doing. And she bet on him, in 1993 when she
Right.
was married.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe not every single part of that bet worked out, but
Right.
a lot of it did. And
Yeah.
so, and maybe she's at the point where she can be like, we got 25 years in and we had a good run.
Yeah. And you know what? They both obviously like adventure, because I can't imagine that must. I mean, they had very stable, high paying jobs on Wall Street. It's not like you know, um, it's not like he was working a low income job and then took a shot. He left a very stable thing to take a shot, and she was along for that ride, which shows a certain level of adventure, and that could have played a role too, because this is kind of um, a new adventure, right?
I'm very interested. I wish we knew more. We're
Yeah,
used to knowing more, we're used to seeing
yeah,
more. And I'm very curious to see who Mackenzie ends up with and what Mackenzie does, because she is a very interesting, very quiet character in this whole situation.
right. Do you think, if you could ask her I guess if you could find out one piece, if you could ask one question and get an answer, what do you think it would be?
Why did you walk
Yeah,
away
Yeah.
with so
Uh,
little.
I'm surprised
Little being a
nobody's.
very relative term.
You know what's weird? I will tell you. I have Googled that question. You know, and I have not seen anything from her. I've seen a lot of really, in my opinion, poor opinions. Like there's really, it's an obvious question, and nobody's really asking it, which is kind of funny. I think there is a prevailing sentiment, which is uh, a problem she um, that she did okay, even though she got less than half because she got a lot. But in general, I think that can trickle down to people that aren't worth $72 billion, right? And
What
that's
you
kind of the
said is
problem,
important.
right?
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, there's a sentiment that I think I've noticed online a lot fewer voices that are kind of taking the position that you've said is like, hey, she should have fought for more. And I think in general, there's a prevailing sentiment that she got what she deserved, even though it was less than half, because Jeff Bezos built the empire, right? That's kind of what people think. But really, I mean, like we said at the beginning, she was a part of that, and that's what community property is all about. And the concern is, how does that trickle down, to someone who's worth $400,000, where these numbers kind of matter a little bit more,
Right.
uh,
What
or
is
have an
what is
impact?
I mean, it's an interesting question. What does this high profile divorce do to everyday couples who are getting divorced, who have, let's say, $1 million in assets? Does the business owner husband with the net worth of $1 million say to his wife, you're getting $250,000.
Yeah,
Stop being greedy.
yeah.
It's enough.
Well, it happens all the time
It
in
happens all
our
the
world.
time.
Yep, it happens all the time in our world.
I can't turn off the staunch feminist in me that's like,
Yeah,
Mackenzie, what are you doing? You could
yeah.
have done a lot with that
This is
money.
about you, Mackenzie. This is about every other girl in the world.
It is.
I,
It is.
I feel you on that. I feel you.
It is. And the other thing is, like, for most people, divorce is a huge financial hit. And for me, like, my general philosophy is like, life is about maximizing your choices, because success is about cumulative decision making and cumulative gains. So, and this is one of the most crucial decisions. So, one of the decisions that we make, that affects us very, very much is, where do we go to college and what degree do we get and what's our first job? But every single time we make a decision, who do we marry, whether or not we have kids, and especially the decisions that we make when we get a divorce, will have a cumulative impact on our future and our ability and our choices. And so when I have a client, I really want to advocate to get them in the best possible position that I can get them in.
Right. Yeah, as you should. Warren Buffett once said, "The most important decision you'll ever make is who you marry," and he's up there
I
in the.
just want to add to that. I don't think he's wrong, but also when to get a divorce.
Yeah, that's true.
Because
Warren Buffett had a happy marriage. Yeah.
if you are married to somebody who is taking away from your cumulative opportunities, who's making bad choices after bad choices, then at some point you have to decide, when am I going to cut my losses? When am I better off not continuing in this marriage? So I'm happy for Warren.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think he's remarried. His first wife um, passed away, um, but they were married for a long time, and she was basically along for his ride. Um, but I think I forgot what I was going to say. No,
That's all right. I think we may have beaten the Bezos horse to
yeah,
death.
the Bezos horse is beaten to death. I wish them, I guess one more thought would be, hindsight can kind of be 2020. It's hard now that we know that Amazon's done so well over the last 2 years. It's hard to rewrite that out of your narrative. But I mean, as somebody that owns stocks, it's you never know what's going to happen. You want them to go up, but sometimes they go down. I mean, um, she certainly got a certain outcome.
She got a certain outcome. We never know. We never know. All we can do is make the best decision we can with the information we have at the time. And I just hope that when you're making these choices, that you are not doing so, that you understand your worth, your entitlement, that you understand that whatever that has been built during your marriage is a product of both people's efforts. And MacKenzie wasn't the CEO, but she was there brainstorming when they created Amazon, supporting her husband, driving the car while he did the business plan.
She was the first accountant too. She was
She was the
Amazon's
first
first
accountant.
accountant.
She
I
was
mean,
in the
very
business.
much.
And you know, everybody's, well, the prevailing opinion of you got enough, be happy with what's enough. You know, I just think we need to question that. And we need to remember what the deal is. When you get married, you get in the boat together, and the boat either raises or sinks. And whatever it is, you're in it together, and everybody should be in an equal-ish position when they get divorced.
Right. And I think, I mean, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I think there is a trend in divorce cases where, generally speaking, if we're talking, the traditional income earner, their their overall budgetary impact, even with payment of spousal maintenance,
Mhm,
improves post divorce,
mhm, mhm.
whereas their spouses goes down. Right. Um,
Explain what that means.
so, like, let's say I'm married. I think most and my wife didn't work. Well, it kind of sentiment of it's why is divorce so expensive? Because it's worth it. Meaning it's cheaper for me to pay her spousal maintenance than it is for me to continue to deal with all the expenses or whatever financial issues are going on. Whereas it's, she's getting less financial support post divorce in
Yeah.
terms of cash flow. That it's not an equal split by any means.
Okay.
Um,
Let me say this in another way.
okay.
I think what I'm hearing you say is if you are the higher earning spouse and you feel like your spouse is not contributing to your overall gain and your ability to work and your ability to make money, it is cheaper for you to get out and pay maintenance than to stay in that marriage when we're talking about a purely financial
Correct.
analysis.
Correct. Correct. I think in general, and that's certainly true in in Bezos. I mean, his in his situation. But yeah, I think that's you know you don't even in community property states is what I'm saying. You don't exactly end up in equal footing. It's not
And
like
so from the higher income earning spouse's point of view, if you're in a marriage that you know is going to end, you are better off financially getting out earlier. And if you are in a marriage and you are financially earning less, it is in your interest to get as good of a deal as you can,
yes,
because in the long run you are getting the short end of the stick in
yeah,
terms of you both invested, you help build this career together. You know, he or she gets to take their earning capacity and continue to rise, and you do not have the same benefit. So you should maximize, you should walk away from the divorce in as good a financial position as you can, and then continue to make decisions that increase your earning ability and your earning capacity.
yep. And as a wise attorney once told me, you only get one shot at it.
At getting a divorce, it's true. You don't get a
Yeah.
do-over.
So you gotta be like Hamilton. Pick
Yeah,
your
right. So many Hamilton references.
Thank
Thank you, Darin. It has been
you.
fun as always, and I'm not sure what we're talking about next time. Any ideas?
Are we recording? This
We are.
we'll cut it at.
Figure it out and we'll let everybody know.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.